The bottle of multivitamins on your kitchen counter cost $47. The pharmacy sold it to you with a smile. But an 83-year-old Amish woman in Holmes County, Ohio, has never swallowed a single pill in her life, and her blood work would shame yours. I'm going to tell you about 15 foods that quietly heal the bodies of plain families across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. Foods that researchers at Johns Hopkins have studied for over 40 years, trying to understand why Amish children develop asthma at a fraction of the rate of mainstream American kids. The answer is sitting in their pantries. What I learned from a woman named Mariam Beiler in a kitchen smelling of bone broth and cracked black pepper will change how you eat for the next 7 days. Every food on this list comes from any grocery store in America. Stay with me to the end, because the 15th food is the one almost nobody outside the plain community knows about. I came to this work the hard way. My wife Eleanor was 61 when her cardiologist handed her a 4th prescription and shrugged. 4 medications, each one treating a side effect of the last. I watched her get smaller, quieter. I watched the woman I married for 34 years stop laughing at the kitchen table. A neighbor of ours had family in Holmes County. She drove me out there one September morning, and I sat across from Mariam Beiler at a long oak table while she poured coffee from a blue enamel pot. Mariam was 79 then. She had buried 2 husbands and raised 11 children. Her hands were brown and strong. She had never been hospitalized once in her life. She listened to my story. Then she stood up, walked to her cellar door, and started bringing things up to the table, one by one, 15 of them. The first was raw apple cider vinegar, with the mother still floating inside the jar, cloudy, alive. Mariam told me her own mother, born in 1908 in Lancaster County, took a spoonful every morning of her adult life and lived to 94. Researchers studying fermented vinegars have documented measurable effects on blood sugar response after meals. The acetic acid slows glucose absorption. Your pharmacy sells you a $40 bottle of berberine. Mariam's vinegar costs $3 and works on the same metabolic pathway. The second was sauerkraut. Real sauerkraut. Not the pasteurized cabbage in a plastic bag at the supermarket. Mariam crocked her own every fall, and a single tablespoon of properly fermented kraut contains more live probiotic cultures than most $20 capsules. Penn State Extension has published guidance on traditional fermentation for decades. The Amish never stopped doing it. The rest of America forgot. But here is what nobody tells you about kraut. The juice is more medicinal than the cabbage itself. Mariam's mother used to drink a small glass of kraut brine every morning for what she called a sour stomach. Modern research on the gut microbiome has caught up with what these women always knew. The brine carries the bacteria your gut has been starving for since processed food took over American kitchens in the 1950s. The third food was bone broth simmered for 26 hours on the back of a wood stove. Real broth. The kind that gels solid in the refrigerator. Most American grocery store broths are flavored water with caramel coloring. Mariam's broth contained collagen, glycine, glutamine, and minerals leached from grass-fed marrow. Researchers studying joint health have documented how dietary collagen supports cartilage repair in aging adults. The pharmaceutical industry sells you glucosamine for $30 a bottle. Mariam was making something more potent from beef bones the butcher gave her free. The fourth was raw, unpasteurized honey from her own hives. Local honey. Holmes County wildflowers. Mariam used it for sore throats, for cuts, for her grandchildren's seasonal allergies. Therefore, the honey was not just food. It was medicine. The honey contained pollen specific to her region, and when her grandchildren ate a teaspoon a day, starting in late winter, they walked through hay fever season without a single antihistamine. The fifth food sitting on her table was fresh garlic. Whole bulbs. Mariam crushed a clove every morning and let it sit for 10 minutes before eating it raw on buttered sourdough. The 10 minutes matter. Crushed garlic releases allicin, a compound that researchers have studied for cardiovascular and antimicrobial effects for over half a century. But the compound only forms after the garlic is broken open and allowed to oxidize. Most Americans cook garlic immediately. Heat destroys the allicin. Mariam knew, the way her grandmother knew, the way her grandmother's grandmother knew, that garlic must rest before it heals. The sixth food was raw butter from a Jersey cow her son milked at 4 a.m. Yellow, almost orange. The color of grass-fed cream that has not been touched by a centrifuge or a pasteurizer. This butter contained vitamin K2, conjugated linoleic acid, and butyrate in concentrations that researchers studying cardiovascular health have repeatedly found protective rather than harmful. The American Heart Association told your generation for 40 years that butter would kill you. Studies tracking Amish populations who eat raw dairy daily show they have lower rates of heart disease than the average American. The seventh was sourdough bread, not the artisan loaves at Whole Foods. Real sourdough fermented for 16 to 24 hours with a wild starter that some Lancaster families trace back generations. The long fermentation breaks down phytic acid and partially digests the gluten before it ever reaches your stomach. People who cannot tolerate commercial bread often eat traditional sourdough without any reaction at all. The eighth food Mariam brought to the table was a dark green bunch of fresh nettles, dried over the summer, ready for tea. Nettles, the weed Americans pull out of their gardens. Mariam's grandmother used nettle tea for joint pain, for low iron, for the slow exhaustion that creeps into women after menopause. Nettles contain measurable amounts of iron, calcium, magnesium, and silica. The ninth was beets, fermented beets, specifically. Mariam called the brine her heart tonic. She drank a small glass before lunch most days. The pigments in beets, called betalains, support the body's nitric oxide production, which researchers have linked to healthy blood pressure. Your cardiologist has a prescription pad. Mariam had a mason jar. But here is where the story turns. Because the food industry knew. They knew in the 1920s when they started pasteurizing dairy at industrial scale. They knew in the 1950s when they replaced lard with hydrogenated vegetable oil. They knew in the 1970s when they convinced your mother that margarine was healthier than butter. Every step that pulled mainstream Americans away from traditional food made somebody very rich, and it made your generation sick. The 10th food was eggs from chickens that walked freely on grass. The yolks were deep orange, not yellow. These eggs contained 4 to 6 times the omega-3 fatty acids of supermarket eggs, along with significantly higher vitamin D and vitamin A. Researchers studying pasture-raised eggs have confirmed these differences repeatedly. Mariam ate 3 a day. Her cholesterol was textbook normal. The 11th was lard. Yes, lard. Rendered from pasture-raised pigs and stored in glass jars in her cellar. Traditional lard from healthy animals contains substantial monounsaturated fat, the same kind celebrated in olive oil, along with naturally occurring vitamin D. The seed oils that replaced lard in American kitchens, soybean, corn, and canola, were industrial byproducts marketed as health foods. Let me walk you through how the kraut lives in Mariam's kitchen, because this is the practice that changed Eleanor's gut health within 3 weeks. Into the crock goes shredded green cabbage, layer by layer, with a sprinkle of unrefined sea salt between each layer. The cabbage releases its own water as the salt draws it out. By the end of an hour, the cabbage sits submerged in its own brine. A clean plate weighted with a stone presses everything below the surface. The crock rests on the cellar floor, where the temperature stays around 60 degrees. By the third day, faint bubbles rise to the surface. By the seventh day, the smell shifts from raw cabbage to something deeper, sour, alive. By day 14, the kraut tastes finished. By day 21, it has reached the complexity that Mariam's mother taught her to recognize. The crock keeps in the cellar for months. Each spoonful carries billions of live cultures into the body. This is what an Amish kitchen does on a Tuesday afternoon. No equipment, no laboratory, no prescription. The 12th food was raw milk, kefir, fermented on the kitchen counter in a glass jar with a cloth tied over the top. The kefir grains had been in Mariam's family for 3 generations. The microbial diversity in real kefir dwarfs anything sold in the dairy aisle. Researchers studying the Amish microbiome have documented levels of bacterial diversity in Amish children that simply do not exist in mainstream American kids. The 13th was elderberry syrup, simmered down from berries she picked along her fence line every August. Mariam's grandchildren took a teaspoon a day from October through March. Studies on elderberry have repeatedly shown reductions in the duration and severity of common viral illnesses. The 14th was horseradish root, fresh, grated, mixed with a little vinegar and salt, and kept in a small jar in the icebox. Mariam used it for sinus congestion, for slow digestion, for what she called heaviness in the chest. The compounds in fresh horseradish are powerfully antimicrobial. But the 15th food. The 15th food is the one I came here to tell you about. The one that almost no English person knows. The one Mariam pulled from the very back of her cellar, wrapped in a cloth, and placed on the table last. It was a small jar of fermented garlic honey. Whole peeled garlic cloves submerged in raw honey, sealed in a glass jar, and left to ferment slowly for at least 1 month. The honey draws moisture out of the garlic. The garlic releases its allicin into the honey. The slow fermentation creates a medicine that Mariam's family has used for over 100 years for coughs, sore throats, low immunity, and the early signs of any winter illness. The honey turns thin and golden brown. The garlic turns soft and mellow. A single clove eaten at the first sign of a cold, with a spoonful of the honey, has kept Mariam's family out of doctors' offices for 3 generations. This is the food the supplement industry cannot bottle, because the magic is in the slow time and the live ingredients. You cannot pasteurize it. You cannot powder it. You cannot patent it. You can only make it in your own kitchen with 2 ingredients from any grocery store and a month of patience. Eleanor has been eating from this list for 2 years now. She is off 3 of her 4 medications. Her cardiologist asked her what she changed. She told him. He looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. This is the knowledge your grandmother had and your mother lost. This is what the plain communities never gave up. And now it sits in your hands. If your grandmother made any food on this list, I want you to leave a comment right now and tell me which one. Tell me her name. Tell me your state. Your story belongs in this conversation. And if you want to recover the skills that mainstream America traded away, subscribe and stay close, because next week, I'm walking you through the one bread the Amish bake every Saturday that has kept their digestive systems healthier than ours for 300 years.